students. I'm Natalie Dowling, and I teach English at Carter High School. Welcome to KCS at Home Summer Edition. Today's lesson is based on Task 4 for English. If you don't have this assignment, it can be found by visiting the KCS website at knoxschools.org. Click See All Resources under the KCS at Home logo. Please be sure to complete the entire week's lesson before continuing this video. As I said, if you haven't completed the KCS at Home Summer Edition, task number 3 for English 3, stop and return to this video once you have finished your work so we can go over it together. Now, let's get started. So today what we're going to be working on is a narrative nonfiction reflective essay. So let's go over your learning targets, which I have highlighted here in yellow. Today you're going to write narratives to develop real or imagined experiences or events. You're going to develop and strengthen your writing as needed by planning, revising, editing, rewriting. And you're going to interpret figures of speech and analyze their role in the text. So let's move down here to writing a reflective essay. Again, I've gone through and I've highlighted the essential parts that we're going to look at. Read along with me here. It says a reflective essay is a type of personal narrative in which writers share insights and observations about life, often through presenting a problem and exploring how it was resolved or potentially left unresolved as a result of the writer's experiences. It also provides opportunities for recollection of past, present, or imagined experiences, and thoughtful reflection on these experiences. So today's activity is twofold. We're first going to read a story, kind of analyze it, answer some questions, and then your second task is you are going to be writing your own reflective narrative. Well, let's begin with task 1. Task 1, activity 1. So here's question 1 I'd like you to answer. It says, before reading, you've probably read and written personal narratives. What are some common elements of good personal narratives? So what I put here in red is my answer that I came up with. So if I'm thinking about a personal narrative, I'm thinking the way it's written allows me to personally engage with the writing as I feel connected as a reader. The writing seems to come off of the page, and it feels like a person is physically in front of me telling the story. So I think those are good things of a good storytelling. We are not put to sleep by the writing, which means that the author uses action words, like active words, which we'll look at momentarily. So perhaps in the present tense. And lastly, I said because it feels like the author is in front of us, his or her writing structure uses a variety of sentence structures that mimics how we speak. So when we speak, we use simple sentences, complex sentences. So we have all that together, and that's what a good personal narrative does as well. So before we get started with reading, we're going to be thinking about several things as we are reading through the writer's book. Here it says, most reflective essays are structured to include 3 parts. One is an incident. Obviously, since this is a reflection, we need an incident to have taken place. So that's a description of an experience or situation. We have a response, which is the writer's initial or immediate thoughts and feelings in response to the incident. So what are they initially feeling? And the reflection, this is when the writer, after some time has passed, he or she is able to thoughtfully consider the importance of the incident and the situation to his or her life. So that's the impact and looking back of how that shaped one's life. So here they've broken it down into a triangle. Here's our personal essay. I, just for the sake of this particular activity, I put response in blue, incident in pink, and reflection in yellow. So I'm going to be highlighting throughout the story where I see these things take place. You may say, well, I don't have a highlighter. Well, you can use different symbols. So maybe for incident, you're putting a star, reflection, you're putting a smiley face, and response you're putting a zigzag. Or you can be underlining it. But just as long as we're looking through this writing and we're identifying these three things. All right, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to read the story New York City by Con Shoei. And I'm going to be going through and highlighting, as you can see here, we have the pink, the yellow, and blue. Now remember what I said, for mine, I've highlighted response in blue, incident in pink, and reflection. Before we begin reading any story or any type of writing, we're always thinking about several things. We're thinking about what is the lens of the narrator. So what is their age? What is their personal background? What does the narrator tell us in his story? We're thinking about place. So what does place have in terms of importance to that narrator and the message he's trying to relay to us? We're thinking about switches in terms of tone. So we're thinking about vocabulary. How is this narrator, because they're not physically in front of us, how are they pretending like they're physically in front of us as we read by using particular language? So I want us to know all of these things as we read through this, because these are the questions at the end that's going to be asked of us. So let's get started. Just as a note, there is going to be a switch of when this character, I don't want to give it away for you, but seeing an event through the lens of a child versus seeing the lens when you're an adult. So I want you to be thinking about that as we're reading. Think about your own experiences in terms of when something happens to you when you're 5 versus when you're reflect on that when you're 8. Okay? So let's get started. We are accelerating past 60 on the bridge, headed from the depths of Queens into Manhattan. The dusty meter is switched off, windows rolled down, wind raging through my hair. I'm sitting in the front seat of a battered and archaic Ford Crown Victoria. The car is bright yellow. My father is driving, and I see fatigue in his eyes. But I am only 11, and thrilled finally to be taken. The cab smells of manufactured lilies from an aerosol can, always overdone and stuffy, and the engine drones on while I fiddle with the cold metal of the ashtray. Nestled in the gray leather of my father's taxi, I coyly peer out across the river at the ethereal city in a swirling wind. Tonight, when Manhattan is doused in a steamy fog, the metropolis seems more and more distant as we drive closer. I fail to make out any of the skyscrapers through the impenetrable mist. Instead, every few seconds, like the revolving beacon of a lighthouse, a few white flashes emerge from the soupy haze of the night, daring me to come through. My father is not a simple man, but a man who keeps it simple. Work hard, he says. Grab the opportunities that come to you. As I get older and we grow further apart, this seemingly cliched counsel of his gradually contorts itself into an agonizing burden. I learned his story in fragments from my mother. Refusing to heed the warnings back home, he immigrated to New York City at the age of 23, leaving behind his widowed mother and a promising career as a journalist to try and give his children a better life. He settled in the city, but far from the city as I would come to know it. For Manhattan is not the origin of dreams, but only their destination. Instead, he found a small tenement in Queens between the Spanish and the Greeks, and temporarily took up driving a taxi 12 hours a day while he raised his family and tried to rebuild his career. What was once temporary has become permanent, and what was once an American dream has become an immigrant reality. I can recall very little from my early childhood with any clarity aside from a few moments with my father. I remember he used to work a double shift on Sundays and took Monday off to rest, so that every once in a while, if I was lucky enough and I behaved myself, he might reluctantly take me atop Empire State Building. We would arrive just as the sun was setting. I was too young to have been able to see anything, so he would hoist me up high and let me clutch dearly to the diagonally crossed wiring before us. Far above the concrete streets, where ordinary hopes and dreams suddenly seemed trivial. I asked my father everything about New York. It was there, grasping the fence on the 86th floor, that I truly learned of my city, more from the sound of my father's voice than the actual words he spoke. And if I was patient enough, he would whisper to me in native tongue of one of his reporting assignments at Casablanca, and the day he started to dream of a world beyond his homeland, and in particular New York. The city, it seems, has a way of simultaneously promising everything and nothing. My father has never voiced a complaint about what has become of his family, but in stark contrast to our days atop the city, a time when more possibilities lay ahead for him, today I can sense the slightest tinge of regret in his voice. He has grown quieter as he has aged, perhaps from the strain of unforgiving work, but also perhaps because he has begun to think in hypotheticals. Whether he regrets his decision to come to New York, I will never know for sure. But one fact alone stands. My father never went back. The words hard work warrant a different meaning when they come from someone who has sacrificed that much for you. The guilt continues to drive me apart from my father, probably because I am not the man he is. I can tell that he silently hopes to live out his American dream vicariously through his children. I am scared to shoulder that kind of responsibility, to try and live out a glorious American dream for my father, but too ashamed not perpetually to want to do it for him as well. His sacrifice, however burdening, will always serve as a powerful source of inspiration. The days of me tagging along when my father drives his taxi, the two of us going atop the Empire State Building together, are long gone. But whenever I think about what lies ahead, the memories are suddenly resuscitated. I cannot help but hope that one day for me, unlike my father, New York City stands as a symbol of all that I could do and not all that I couldn't. Okay, so let's look at what I highlighted here and what these things might mean. So again, response is in blue, incident is in pink, and reflection is in blue. So we have to have our incidents first. We have two incidents. One is when he is remembering riding along with his dad in the cab, seeing New York City, all the lights, so all the opportunity that comes with that. And the second one is still when he's a child, and that's when his dad, on one of his days off, takes him atop the Empire State Building, and he sees this glorious world below him. He's tall on his dad's shoulders, which is a metaphor for feeling like as a kid, New York City is promising. So we have our immediate responses, and we see through the lens of his childhood 11-year-old self. He sees his dad as like, wow, this is amazing. This is awesome. I get to see the city. Everything that my dad's doing is really great memories. And then what we have as his reflection as an adult is he's looking back and he's thinking, gosh, my dad came here for the American dream, but he only ever stayed a taxi driver. He doesn't know for sure if his dad ever regretted that situation of leaving his promising career in Casablanca. But we also see him as an adult think about all that his dad gave up for him, and it feels a burden. So we see words down here like he uses burden. So the idea that as the second wave of immigration, or a father who was an immigrant, he is native, the narrator is native to America, seeing like, man, my dad gave up so much. Am I ever going to be able to live up to that? However, his father's trials as an immigrant to a new country also serve as an inspiration for him to continue. So now we have some after reading questions. And again, I have put my answers in red. So Go ahead and look to see how yours match up. So it says, when you have finished reading, respond to the questions. So here we are. Question 5. The author opens his reflective essay with an incident from his childhood, written in present progressive verb tense. We are accelerating. I am sitting. Why do you think the author starts this way? And what does it reveal about his point of view? So this is a two-part question, so you need to make sure that you've answered both parts, because a lot of these have double questions within. So I said the author's use of present tense allows the reader to be in the moment with the story. So we, as the readers, feel like we are a part of the story as it's unfolding. And in terms of what does this reveal about his point of view, I said perhaps the author begins this way because he too is putting himself back in the place of being 11 years old and riding in his father's cab. So it's almost like we're on this journey together with him, where he is having to reflect back, think back what it was like, that incident, in his own 11 years. Okay. Question 6. It says paragraphs 2 to 3 provide exposition on the father's history. How do these paragraphs complicate the essay, and how do they impact the tone? So again, we have to ask ourselves, why is the author telling us about his dad's history? How is it complicating things? How is it impacting tone? Question 6, which says paragraphs 2 to 3 provide exposition on the father's history. How do these paragraphs complicate the essay, and how do they impact the tone? So I said the author uses a mixture of telling about the incident and reflecting upon what it reveals about his father's life. By integrating the two components, the author is juxtapositioning an 11-year-old's view of what his father does with that of an adult's point of view about his father's struggles in his new home. We view his father through two lenses, as an 11-year-old, where his view of his father is simple, and as the 11-year-old who is now an adult, who sees his father as a more complicated person. So how that all impacts the tone is when the author reflects as an adult, his reflection takes on a very serious tone. Question 7 says the fourth paragraph is a single sentence. Why do you think the author made this choice? It said the paragraph is powerful despite being short because it has the reader become active in the reflection too. This sentence has us think about our own notions of the American dream and how, for some, the dream never becomes a reality. Question 8 says paragraph 5 is the longest in the essay and it introduces another incident. How is this paragraph similar to and or different from paragraph 1? And how does it impact the essay's focus and tone? So my answer is, like the introduction paragraph, this paragraph introduces another incident. However, the author interweaves more of the incident with an adult reflection of the incident in this part of the essay. The introduction has us view his father and the city strictly from the 11-year-old's point of view. But here, the author recalls the incident through an adult's perspective of what happened in the past. So how this affects the focus and tone. As I said, the author switched to viewing the incident through an adult's lens shifts the tone to serious. The focus of the essay shifts away from what an 11-year-old sees to that of what an adult sees about his father and the experience in his new world. Question 9 says, how do paragraphs 6 to 7 advance the central ideas of the essay, and how does this central idea impact the essay's tone? So I said the story's introduction has the reader view the city as a place of promise. The 11-year-old views the cab ride, the buildings, the atmosphere as a place where the dream takes root. However, paragraphs 6 to 7 reveal to us that the possibilities never materialize for the author's work. The American dream for the author is no longer seen as promising, but in fact as a burden, because he uses that word in his writing. For he feels a responsibility to make his father's dream a reality since he could not do so himself. The paragraphs focus on the central idea stated in paragraph 4. The immigrant reality is not necessarily that of the American dream. Therefore, the tone is serious and perhaps a more realistic take on the possibilities of achieving those dreams versus that of a young child. Question 10. Says the conclusion of a narrative essay typically serves to explore the change in the narrator's point of view as a result of his own experiences. Sometimes the writer makes the significance of the event explicit, directly stating what was learned. Other writers choose to imply the significance, suggesting rather than stating what was learned. Still others leave the significance ambiguous or even unresolved. What approach does Shoaib seem to use, and how does this impact the authors or the essays overall? So I said the tone in the introduction and the conclusion are vastly different, as the lenses through which a story is told is different, child versus adult. While the adult author knows the limitations of the dream, he still has hope that the city symbolizes the promise of achieving the dream, which is how we view the city as a child. He concludes his narrative as a promise to his father to try to persevere with achieving the American dream, but understands that certainty is not guaranteed, so he's pretty explicit in this. Question 11 says, is the writer's use of symbolism and or structure to advance the central ideas of the essay effective? Why or why not? I said yes. The author uses the city of New York and its skyscrapers to symbolize the growth and promise of the new beginning in America, where the only movement is up, like movements, which he references throughout his work. His structure interweaves the reflection of the incidents, both through the lens of a child experiencing it, with that of an adult looking back on what it really meant. And our last question, which is checking for understanding. Question 12 says, how did Shoaib structure and sequence his essay to build to its complex overall tone? So I said, like any good storyteller, Shoaib structures his story using a variety of past and present. The sequence is complex as he's interweaving the incidents with his adult reflection. His structure is not static, which means that, like Shia, we too, as readers, have the ability to reflect upon the incidents with him as he relays the narrative about his father's work. Right now we're on to task 2, which is your turn to write your own reflective narrative. So let's go down here to the next page. Again, I bolded the important things in your writing group, so this is what we're going to be doing too. You are going to consider a time when something happened to you that taught you a lesson about yourself or about life. It's a lesson that your audience might benefit from learning. Write a narrative about your experience, encouraging others to think about this lesson. So think about descriptions and details, and really this comes down to author's choice because you are the writer and this is your voice as a storyteller. So before I send you off to get writing, I want us to go over a couple things that I want you to think about in your pre-note. So the first thing is we're going to brainstorm some ideas here. So I want you to consider a time when something happened to you that changed your life in some way or taught you a lesson. So you may get stuck and think, nothing's ever happened to me. I don't know, I've never learned a lesson. Well, that's not true. So let's start thinking about the possible subjects that might inspire you. Do you play sports? Did something happen there? Is there any lesson you learned about a family or a family member? What about incidents with your friends? If you've ever experienced something like sickness or horrible things like loss. On the flip side, has anything that's really great ever happened to you, like the good times? Has that impacted you? Have you ever been on a trip before? It could even be a trip to the grocery store. It doesn't have to be something, in California. Is it a particular food that you experienced? Is it something that a pet taught you? So think about any realm of your life and where you have learned a lesson. So let's look at the components of a reflective narrative. So we'll go over this again. So we have to consider what each of these 3 components are going to look like in your narrative. So we have the incident. What happened to you? We have your response. What was your immediate initial, right after it happened? What were your thoughts about it? And given that time has passed between the incident and now, how are you reflecting? I want you to consider the structure that you're going to take. So what is the structure in your essay going to look like with these 3 components? So are you going to begin your narrative in the present, past, or future tense? So remember, in our story, um, he started it with his incident as a child. So we were immediately put into the shoes of an 11-year-old. So what are you going to do? Or are you going to alternate between your incident, reflection, and response, like the author did? Those are all interwoven. Or are you going to take a more linear approach, which means are you first going to start with the incident and talk about your initial response, and then finish with your reflection? That's up to you as a storyteller. Now I want us to consider the language that creates the tone. So think about your incident and the message that you're trying to convey. What type of tone are you trying to convey? This is matching your message. This has to do with your word choices. So what language are you going to use to develop the tone of your message? You should consider what literary devices. Just use your background knowledge. You're in 11th grade of all the things that you've learned in prior English classes, be it euphemisms, metaphors, alliteration, similes, etc. How might those impact? Think about the sentence structure that contributes to your message. So I want you to consider how a variety of sentence structures is going to contribute to your purpose, the story you're trying to tell. So think about using short sentences for impact, like you saw the author use, which one paragraph was one sentence. Or are you going to use long passages to create background? Are you going to intermix them? So again, these are things that you have as choices. Okay, now that we reviewed those things, it's time for you to get started writing. I do want you to remember that writing is a process, which means it is a series of writing, reflecting. Good writers reflect upon their writing as they write, not just after they're finished with the draft. So you might want to think about just after every sentence, after every paragraph, thinking, is this conveying the message that I want to my reader? Do I need to include things to enhance my writing? Or maybe you're a long-winded writer like I am, and I have to omit things to make things clear in my writing, so I'm not with repetition in my writing. So again, you should be reflecting upon your writing in the writing process. Okay? Well, I hope you enjoy writing your reflective narrative, and I hope for this summer that you have a very good one and that you continue to read and write through these summer months, and I hope to see you back this fall.